Hello, welcome back to Spice of Life Studio. I'm going to give you a little rundown on infertile cannabis today, what I call my VeroSinse program. And yeah, I think I've been getting a lot of interest in it. So let me tell the story once more of how I came across it by accident the first time. Spent years figuring out how to make it, and finally figured out some ways to do it that we're having some fun with. So let me say something about infertile cannabis. We're talking about female cannabis that cannot receive pollen. Okay, so these plants are visually obvious because they have no hairs, or what is often called pistils, but in reality are stigma, to be more accurate. The stigmas of the flower are the receptacles of the pollen, where it lands and sprouts and travels up the stigma to pollinate the calyx, which is within the bract, which people often call calyxes mistakenly, but something we've all been in the habit of doing in the cannabis community for a long time, but that is what's what. So if a plant doesn't have any hairs, there's nowhere for the pollen to land and take. And the first time I found one of these plants was purely accidental on my part, at least. What happened was a friend was selling eights around Vancouver when we'd met. And she normally had stuff that she was selling for $40, and friends of mine used to buy from her. So anyways, I'd met her a few times, and she was once a year or so, she had something that she said, this stuff's super special, and it's $55 an eighth, which was unheard of in Vancouver at the time. And she said, oh, this guy, his weed comes out like twice a year. It's super special. Nobody else has it. And it's very distinct. And so when it came out, we had a look at it and said, hey, yeah, interesting weed for sure. And she said, well, if there may be a couple seeds in this batch, and the grower said if anybody finds a few seeds in it, they should save them and consider themselves lucky. So anyway, a number of my friends bought eights. I ended up buying one too. And between us, I think we found 6 seeds between a few people that had an eighth. And so everybody gave me their seed. And of the 6 seeds, when I planted them, I had all 6 sprout. All 6 were female, but 3 of them had hairs and 3 of them had no hairs. And I'd never seen that before. And I didn't know what to make of it, but I was already in the habit of making seeds at that point. So I had pollen to hit them with. I tried, anything to get the pollen into those ones with no hairs, but they would not take. The sisters with hairs all took pollen like a normal plant, and they had lots of seed. And those I released them as Berserker, but Emery sold them as Tight Skunk. So if anybody ever grew some Tight Skunk, that's where those came from. The father was the same NL Hayes that made the Sweet Skunk, which I'd released as Big Fruit, and Emery had changed the name to Sweet Skunk. So anyway, that was where those came from. But the ones that interested me the most were the 3 that had no hairs. And the other interesting thing about those ones is when I put them into trays, the cuttings to root, the plants with hairs, they rooted in a normal 10, 12 days. But the ones with no hairs, they would root in 3 to 4 days. And I really hadn't seen anything like that. And so I was really floored. And the pot was very frosty and stony. And we thought, man, this is really neat. I don't know what happened here. And I kept those cuts close, but then later lost them after a move and regretted losing those cuts. And had I shared them widely, they would have been everywhere, and I would have got them back like all the other things I'd shared widely. But those I'd held on to and then lost them. So I was thinking, how do I figure out how to make these again? Like, how do you do this? So I studied and studied, and there's tons of information about infertility in other species, particularly. And the most common things, as far as fruits and vegetables that we might be aware of, were predominantly fruits, but is seedless watermelon or seedless grapes are what often springs to mind. And those are made with polyploidy. They make stenocarpic plants. So there's a big difference between Parthenocarpy and Stenocarpy. And in Parthenocarpy, you have two versions, and they're easy to remember, I think, with the way I do. Facultative Parthenocarpy is traditional sensimilla. You facilitate the virgin fruit, Parthenocarpy being virgin fruit. So by keeping the males away or killing hermaphrodites, you facilitate the seedless fruit. That's facultative Parthenocarpy. Obligate Parthenocarpy is when the plant is physically incapable of pollination. It's obliged to remain the virgin fruit. That's obligate Parthenocarpy. Whereas Stenocarpy, they typically don't have as many hairs on them as a regular bud, but they can receive pollen, but they tend to abort the seeds. So this Stenocarpy is what you get when you do polyploidy in grapes, with the seedless grapes having little white pips. Seedless watermelon, same thing. They're not totally seedless. You might find the odd dark seed in a seedless watermelon, but you definitely find some little white immature pips. So for smoking flour, immature seeds are not any better than mature seeds, really. You don't want seeds in flour for consumption that way. So it's really important not to have seeds in smoking weed. It just takes one seed to ruin a joint. Really, it's over. It smells like burning plastic. No good, unacceptable on every level. So even in the EU pharmacopoeia, they have a tolerance of up to 2% seeds or micro seeds by weight in flour for distribution in pharmacies. So if everything was grown was a truly infertile plant, an obligate parthenocarpic specimen, there's 0% chance of any seed, immature seed or otherwise. It really is the only 100% solution as far as that goes. So I'm not making triploids or other polyploids to do it. It's an interesting thing. I found a few different ways to do it, and some of them are more complicated than others. But the one way is particularly easy that I could teach anybody to do, basically. Only prerequisite, know how to make feminized seeds. If you know feminized seeds already, you're qualified to learn. So I decided it would be a nice thing to have as a trademark on the packages of flour that's guaranteed to be seedless, because after 20 some years of feminized seeds dominating the market, there's become a greater tolerance, I think, for hermaphrodites than there used to be. And if people find a seed or two in an eighth, as long as they don't find it when they're smoking it, they tend to be happy about it. So, oh, this was good weed and it's got a seed in it. And, people have found great plants out of bag seed, no doubt. But as a rule, they're not always reliable. And more often than not, they're probably the result of hermaphrodism, and they'll carry it with them. So knowing that finished product is guaranteed seedless, I think that warrants a mark on the package, much in the manner of certified organic or fair trade or something like that. So I call this one of my black and white projects. VeroSinse, your bud is either seedless or it's not. There's no middle ground. You're not, maybe I'm pregnant, you either are or aren't. You're not halfway pregnant. So anyways, the idea was to get some breeders together. So when I filed the trademark almost 2 years ago, probably like a year and a half ago, and I got the lawyers to drop contracts. So I started to contract some breeders to participate as collaborators in building a VeroSinse catalog. And that should be out late this spring, probably. Everything always seems to take longer than you'd like sometimes, but it takes 8 to 12 months to convert just about any plant. Like, we haven't run into something we can't convert. So I'm happy to say you can do it to any cannabis plant, as far as I can see. It'll be a shocker when we find one it doesn't work on. However, some companies would rather grow their own proprietary stuff. So if you're a producer and you've got genetics, you say, well, we don't want to send these out to you to make them. I'm happy to teach them to make them themselves and become VeroSinse licensed producers. And they can get started at that right away. And also, if they don't want to bother making their own and they want to just use the ones from our catalog or suggest ones that we make for our catalog, they can sign up totally for free before the catalog comes out. There's no deposit for producers to join. And when the catalog comes out, the producers are free to try anything on it. They can continually test what we release, and they only will pay royalties on the plants they put into production. So there's no upfront cost from us to them. If there's import costs on their side, or courier fees, licensing fees, whatever, for the transfers of genetics, that's on them. But as far as testing anything from the catalog, that's totally included for the producers that get on board with it now, ahead, just to sign up before the catalog comes out. Once the catalog comes out, I know there's going to be real press of demand because of the impressive nature of the plants that are going to be available. So at that point, we're going to start charging deposits for companies that want to be on board. So for between now and May or June, likely, will be free for companies to sign up that want to license genetics from the catalog. They can test as many as they want, and if they only want to use 1 or 2, that's fine. If they want to use 10 or 20, that's fine. We split the royalties with the collab breeders that are putting the catalog together with us. It's pretty wide range. We were trying to cover everything that's commercially popular, like at each parts of the spectrum. Certain things I think, may not be widely sought after. Other things may be, but we should have pretty good coverage there, I think. Anyways, the third way we'll deal with companies is we'll license propagators and nurseries to carry the plants from the catalog for the public or for smaller producers in that. But we won't be, unless they want to make their own. The ones that want to make their own, they can get on the program to make their own right now, just as producers. And the advantage to producers and nurseries that make their own, they're paying half the royalties. So the genetics royalties from the catalog plants, 5%, and VeroSinse split 2.5% goes to the breeders. And if the producer or nursery makes them, their royalty on those is 2.5%, because they did the breeding themselves. And it's not a complicated thing to do, and it doesn't take a lot of space. They could have a dedicated closet to do it with any of their favorite plants. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. But the people or the companies that are releasing product grown with these VeroSinse licensed cultivars, they can have the Circle V on the packaging. And the Circle V, I think a lot of people are going to look at that trademark and think, oh, is this vegan weed? You know, the Circle V, but it's not vegan weed, it's VeroSinse. And it's just going to be amusing chatter point. I think that there's going to be a little bit of confusion there, but we're not competing over the same thing. It's a different meaning entirely. So that's what VeroSense is. Anyway, I wanted to give you a breakdown of it and a rough idea how it works and what's nice about it. And any questions or comments you have regarding it, I'm curious to see. Definitely leave comments, and I'll get to them eventually. I'm not on them every day, I promise. But if we need to do some follow-up ones, that could happen too. So anyways, I hope you learned a little something about obligate parthenocarpic cannabis and what sets it apart. Thanks for coming out once more, and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye.